Number 3. Patrick Kelly. 1981, Patrick and Jeanette Kelly, who lived in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, were both unhappy in their marriage, and they talked about divorce. 31-year-old Patrick worked for the Royal Mounted Canadian Police as an undercover drug officer. Patrick had been unfaithful to his wife, and he had been seeing several women outside their marriage. In early 1981, he was having affairs with 3 women. He was also having financial problems. He was spending too much money trying to keep up his lavish lifestyle. On March 29, 1981, Patrick called the police, claiming that his 33-year-old wife, Jeanette, fell off the balcony of their 17th floor Toronto high-rise. He claimed his wife had complained about a rattling on the balcony. She took a stool out to investigate. Suddenly, as he stood in the kitchen, he heard her scream. He raced from the kitchen to the balcony and saw Jeanette falling over the railing. He said he managed to get to the balcony in time to grab the upper part of her legs, but he couldn't hold on. She then fell to her death. Patrick claimed that his wife's death was an accident. The Toronto police had their suspicions that Jeanette's death was no accident from the beginning. An autopsy was performed on Jeanette's body the day after her death. The medical examiner noticed some abnormalities. They noted that Jeanette landed in a seated position and she had injuries to the base of her spine and the back of her legs. There were no major external injuries above the waist. The examiner also found an abrasion over her left breast consistent with a blow of some kind. The examiner noted that there were scrapes on her nose and injuries on her lips and jaw. These injuries are commonly seen with punches to the face. But the police didn't feel like they had enough evidence to charge Patrick with murder. In the aftermath of Jeanette's death, Patrick collected about $270,000 from Jeanette's life insurance policy. He had taken the policy out without her knowledge. Patrick quickly moved on with his life. Shortly after the funeral, he vacationed in Hawaii with one of the women he had been seeing behind Jeanette's back. And it wasn't long before Patrick married again. He married Jan Bradley, a librarian who he had been involved with since he was married. In the winter of 1981, Patrick and Jan moved to southern France. The couple lived a lavish lifestyle. They would occasionally take weekend trips to the Bahamas. Patrick bought suits by the dozens. Meanwhile, in Toronto, the police continued collecting evidence against Patrick Kelly. They conducted an experiment by setting up a recreation of the Kellys' apartment. One officer, acting as Jeanette, stood on a stool near a railing, while another officer, serving as Patrick, was positioned in the kitchen. The officer standing in for Patrick was a former 100-yard dasher who was wearing running shoes. Despite their attempts, the officer never got close to reaching the balcony in time to rescue the other officer. They concluded it was impossible for Patrick to run from the kitchen to the balcony in time to reach Jeanette. An expert in velocity from Toronto's Forensic Science Center also disproved Patrick's claim, saying he would not have been able to make it to the balcony before Jeanette hit the ground. The expert also claimed that Jeanette would not have landed on her spine from an accidental fall. The police arrested Patrick when he returned to Canada in March 1983. As the prosecutors built their case against Patrick, a witness came forward that added a twist to the story. Dawn Tabor was a friend of the Kellys in the early 80s. However, she was secretly romantically involved with Patrick. She claimed she was in the apartment when Patrick tossed Jeanette from the balcony. On the day Jeanette was killed, Tabor entered the apartment building through a back entrance with keys given to her by Jeanette. The Kellys let Tabor into the apartment. She sat in the den while they argued in another room. Tabor claimed she heard Jeanette refuse to give Patrick a divorce. She then heard Jeanette scream. She raced into the room and saw Jeanette lying on the floor. Then she saw Patrick pick up his unconscious wife and toss her over the balcony. Tabor collapsed after the incident. Patrick consoled her, told her he loved her, and to go home. Tabor said it took her 2 years to come forward with this information because she was afraid of Patrick, who worked in law enforcement. However, investigators told Tabor nothing would happen to her if she testified. Patrick Kelly went to trial in April 1984. Don Tabor told the court that Patrick would take care of Jeanette so that they could be together. Tabor said that Patrick loved her and wanted to take her to France. She also said that Patrick claimed it was impossible to tell how someone fell from a balcony. The prosecution also alleged that Patrick was involved in money laundering for organized crime. Tabor's testimony and the forensic evidence were enough to convict Patrick Kelly. A jury believed he killed his wife for the insurance payout. Patrick was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Over the next few years, his attorneys appealed the conviction without luck. Patrick maintained that Jeanette's death was an accident. Even the star witness, Don Tabor, changed her story over the years. She fully recanted the story in 1995. Tabor said she, quote, created a false memory from her dreams as a result of police pressure and an unstable emotional state, unquote. She claimed her testimony came from being coerced into giving a statement under hypnosis. She sent a letter to Canada's Justice Minister asking for an immediate audience to discuss the case. Patrick hoped that this would help his bid for a retrial in 1999. However, an Ontario appeals court felt her claim wasn't believable. While in prison, Patrick earned 2 university degrees and a certificate. He also built and donated wood furniture for charity. Patrick's efforts to earn early parole proved little had changed with him. He was denied parole in 2001 when a psychiatric evaluation said he was a cunning, lying manipulator, but he did earn early parole in 2003. However, it was revoked 2 years later when the parole board heard he had defrauded a female business partner of $40,000 and cheated on his common-law wife. He was then awarded day parole in 2008, which had to be renewed every 6 months until he was given full release in 2010. Patrick settled in Prince George, British Columbia, where he spent the latter part of his sentence. In 2012, Patrick was sent back to prison. The parole board claimed Patrick was repeating deceitful behavior. Between May and August 2012, Patrick had been having affairs with 3 women. One of the women came forward after they became aware of his past. The board sent him back to prison because he did not disclose the relationships. He had also developed a drinking problem and lied to customers about his work in his restoration business. These were all violations of his parole. In 2013, he lost his appeal and he was ordered to stay in prison. He was again granted day parole with overnight privileges in 2014. In 2016, the parole board permitted him to move to Vancouver Island. Since then, Patrick Kelly has stayed out of the news. He is about 73 years old at the time of this recording. Number 2. Scott Parrilla. In 1989, Noelis Bayanilla was a 17-year-old student who attended the High School for Art and Design in Midtown, New York. She had recently been accepted into Hunter College in New York City. Noelis' mother said she dreamed of becoming an architect and starting a family. Noelis also worked at a local McDonald's. Around 5 a.m. on August 6, 1989, Noelis was walking home and 19-year-old Scott Parrilla was accompanying her. The two of them made their way to the roof of a 5-story Morris Avenue building. While on the roof, Parrilla made sexual advances on Noelis. Noelis rejected Parrilla's offers of sex. The argument between the two became physical. Noelis scratched Parrilla. He then grabbed her and threw her off the building's roof. The police responded to a call of a woman lying behind the building. When the police arrived, they found Noelis screaming in pain. At first, she could speak, but then lost that ability when she arrived at the hospital. Her mother and nurses continued to communicate with Noelis non-verbally. Noelis used eye blinks to answer questions, and she was able to answer questions from the police. She even blanked out the letters to her attacker's name. Tragically, Noelis Bainilla died 2 days later, on August 8, 1989. Despite identifying Parrilla as her attacker, he wasn't arrested. The police interviewed Parrilla as part of their investigation. He denied knowing her, let alone killing her. However, the police did note that he lived near the McDonald's where she worked. Several witnesses told the police that they had saw a man matching Parrilla's description walking with Noelis on the morning of the incident. But without any physical evidence linking Parrilla to the rooftop that night, the case eventually went cold. In the years following Noelis' death, Scott Parrilla could not stay out of trouble. In 1990, he was arrested for an unrelated robbery. He served 2 years in prison and was released on parole in December 1992. In June 1996, he pleaded guilty to attempted murder in another unrelated case that happened nearly 3 years earlier. In September 1993, he had raped and repeatedly stabbed a woman. While in custody, the police took a DNA sample from Parrilla. His DNA was added to a database and it was linked to another crime. It matched a semen sample from a sexual assault of 2 Bronx teenagers in August 1993. Parrilla pleaded guilty to rape and sodomy in that case in September 2003. He was released from prison under supervision in 2014. But that was short-lived as he was convicted of petty larceny in November 2015 and sent back to prison. Noelis Bainilla's friends and family never gave up hope that the killer would be arrested. Every year on the anniversary of her murder, one of her friends contacted the police asking for any updates. The police would give her the usual response as, quote, "All leads on the case have been exhausted and there were no further developments," unquote. By the friend's insistence, the police reopened Noelis' murder and the Bronx Homicide Unit took over in the summer of 2015. The police re-interviewed witnesses. They also collected DNA evidence that was found under Noelis' fingernails. It turned out to be Scott Parrilla's DNA. The police arrested Parrilla as he was released from Rikers Island on March 14, 2016. He had a mental health evaluation at Bellevue Hospital Center where he expressed suicidal intent during questioning. The arresting officer said that Noelis' mother was overcome with emotion now that her daughter's killer was arrested. The officer said, quote, "As the detective spoke to her, she became incredibly emotional that the person who had killed her daughter had been arrested after all this time," unquote. Parrilla pleaded not guilty to the charges. In an affidavit from his lawyer, Parrilla claimed that the judge made errors during the pretrial rulings. Parrilla's lawyers also claimed his client had PTSD, battled substance abuse, and had suicidal thoughts. On December 5, 2018, a jury found Parrilla guilty of second-degree murder. 2 weeks later, he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for Noelis Bainilla's murder. During the sentencing hearing, Noelis' mother read her victim impact statement. She said, quote, "I cannot put into words what you did to my only child. August 6, 1989, you cut off her life, and you cut out my heart that day. You deserve to rot in jail for the rest of your life," unquote. Number 1. Arthur Freeman. One of Arthur Freeman's friends said he didn't have great people skills. Arthur didn't talk much, and when he did, he often mumbled. He rarely flirted with women and lurked on the edge of groups of people. In high school, he was often tormented by bullies. For example, they would force him to stand on a rock without moving. Arthur Freeman studied computer sciences in the 1990s at Deakin University in Geelong, Australia. After graduating, he landed an IT job at RMIT University's Aeronautics campus in Fisherman's Bend, a suburb of Victoria, Australia. Arthur loved cars and autocross. He would frequently buy Ford Escorts and customize them for racing. In 1998, he met Peter Burns, who worked as an HR rep, and they started dating. The couple got along well. Arthur was an introvert, and Burns was an extrovert who got him out of his comfort zone. The couple quickly moved in together and married on December 31, 1999. couple weeks later, the couple moved to London, England, where Freeman was offered a lucrative IT job. The couple's 3 children were all born in the United Kingdom. Benjamin Eric was born in 2002, Darcy Iris in 2004, and Jonathan Jackson Williams in 2006. Friends knew Arthur to be a good father. He played beach soccer with his sons and took his daughter to ballet. In June 2006, for reasons that weren't made clear, the family moved back to Australia weeks before they were about to receive permanent citizenship in Britain. Back in Australia, Arthur had difficulty finding work. He also experienced wild mood swings. These factors strained Arthur and Peta's marriage. The couple ended up divorcing in March 2007. Initially, the couple shared custody of their children. In 2008, Arthur returned to Britain to get permanent citizenship. When that happened, Peta requested changes to their custody agreement. To make these changes, the court ordered the family to be interviewed by psychologists to find the best fit for the children. The psychologist noted that Arthur had a warm relationship with his children, but she noted that there were problems with Arthur. She reported that Arthur has, quote, chronic personality and interpersonal problems caused by a tendency to irrationality, contradiction, and denial of responsibility, unquote. The psychologist recommended Peta get custody of the children while Arthur gets them on alternate weekends. Arthur was not happy with the decision and vented to his friends. Peta expressed concerns to doctors that her husband would do something to get back at her. She told them that Arthur had been violent with her in the past. However, the doctors didn't think that he was an immediate threat, and they did not report any of this to child protection. By 2009, Arthur Freeman and his wife, Peta Barnes, were locked in a nasty custody battle over their children, 6-year-old Ben, 4-year-old Darcy, and 2-year-old Jack. On the morning of January 29, 2008, Arthur picked up his children at his parents' home. The 3 kids had been staying with his parents. Arthur was supposed to drop off Ben and Darcy for their first day of the school year. It was supposed to be Darcy's first ever day of school. When he picked up his children, Arthur's father noticed that his son looked like he was in a trance. Arthur's ex-wife, Peta Barnes, went to the school to meet her children for the first day of school. But she became concerned when they didn't arrive. Peta called her ex-husband. When she got a hold of him, he said, "Say goodbye to your children." Around 9:15 a.m., Arthur stopped his car on the Westgate Bridge and turned on his hazard lights. He calmly lifted 4-year-old Darcy out of the car and carried her to the bridge's railing. He then threw his daughter over the bridge's railing. Darcy fell about 200 feet into the Yarra River. Several people saw what happened and stopped to help the little girl. One witness later said that Arthur was not aggressive or emotional as he threw her. Arthur returned to the car and drove away as if nothing had happened. Arthur's older son, Ben, kept telling his father to go back. He told his father that Darcy could not swim. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They pulled Darcy from the water. She was alive, but she had suffered multiple injuries and was barely breathing. Paramedics worked on her for 50 minutes, trying to revive Darcy at the scene. Then she was airlifted to the hospital. Unfortunately, Darcy had suffered severe internal injuries. She passed away around 1:30 p.m. with her mother by her side. Darcy was 2 weeks shy of her 5th birthday. The autopsy report said that she had died from injuries sustained in a fall from a height. As his daughter was dying, Arthur drove to the Commonwealth Law Courts complex, where he tried handing off his youngest son to security officers. Arthur became emotional at the complex. He shook and sobbed for about half an hour. The outburst wasn't the first one Arthur had that day. About an hour before the incident, Arthur called a female friend in the United Kingdom. He told her he was about to lose his children, and he said, quote, "Angry women were everywhere," unquote. The friend's cell phone died as she tried to console him. Arthur was arrested at the complex. At his March 2011 trial, Arthur pleaded not guilty to murder based on mental impairment. The key to his defense was his state of mind at the time of the incident. The psychiatrist testifying on his behalf, Arthur's sole witness, told the court that Arthur was suffering from a major depressive disorder. The psychiatrist also said he was in a dissociative state at the time of the murder, much like sleepwalking. 5 other psychiatrists had also interviewed Arthur. They did not agree with the assessment from that psychiatrist. They believed that Arthur was stressed and anxious during the drive, but he was still in control. In their opinion, a man in a dissociative state could not have completed the complex tasks like pulling over, putting on hazard lights, and throwing a child off a bridge. The prosecution told the court that Arthur was acting consciously and voluntarily. The prosecution argued that Arthur was enacting revenge on his ex-wife. After a 19-day trial, a jury of 7 women and 5 men found Arthur guilty of his daughter's murder. On April 11, 2011, Arthur was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 32 years. The presiding judge called Arthur's actions self-centered. He said, quote, "Whatever happens, you'll be spending what many consider will be the best years of your life in prison," unquote. The judge said that the murder was especially horrendous because he did it in front of his other children. The judge said, quote, "What Darcy's last thoughts might have been does not bear thinking about, and her death must have been a painful and protracted one," unquote. The judge believes that Arthur wanted to hurt his ex-wife as, quote, "profoundly as possible," unquote. After the sentencing, Arthur had an outburst in the courtroom. During his rant, he accused his in-laws of diamond theft from Western Australian mines and federal phone taps. He also said he was going to harm himself. Security eventually subdued him. Darcy's mother, Peta Barnes, showed no emotion as her ex-husband was sentenced. She left the courthouse without speaking to reporters. Arthur did not adapt well to prison life in Barton Maximum Security Prison. Fellow inmates constantly taunted Arthur for killing his child. In July 2011, Arthur exploded and got into a scuffle. The guards broke up the fight. He was treated for minor injuries and separated from these inmates. The earliest he'll be released from prison is January 29, 2041, when he'll be 67 years old. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.